Chapter 6, Purification, the Path of Regeneration. A member of the Brotherhood speaks. Let there be peace and happiness. Let there be no confusion in thinking. Let emotionalism be swallowed up in the victory of understanding. When understanding is accepted and through its acceptance received, it can only be appropriated in intelligence. Therefore, there is no room for confusion. Wisdom begets understanding, and understanding is intelligence. Then man is no longer confined to the narrowness of mortal intellect. That has been our goal. Our great aim and purpose is that you, dear ones, see through one window and behold the great wide vistas of intelligence. There's but one mind, God mind, known to many of the earth plane as superconsciousness. The soul is the mind power for the duration of each incarnation. That which is known to man as conscious mind or objective mind is receptive to that which the five senses therein record. It is the indwelling place of desire. It is that which records every desire of the five physical senses. It is that which is referred to by man of your teachers as the carnal mind, wherein carnal thinking had its workshop. During the activity of the day, when the carnal workshop is producing its wares and that portion of the brain is very active, it is there that selfishness, possessiveness, greed, strivings, and tyranny had their residence. When that state known to man as sleep manifests itself, then that workshop is quiet. And all that is created during the walking state seeks lodgment in the subjective channels of the brain. You will recall previous instructions in which we liken that which man calls the subjective mind onto a king who rules its subjects. The subjective mind, so known to man, knows only that which the conscious mind, so-called, sends to the subjective or the subconscious mind, so-called. It is there the unfinished business has its residence and becomes a part of the soul. You'll be mindful of the statement, spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The image and likeness of God, which is God-man, has its residence in the superconsciousness, that is, the inner chamber, the tabernacle of the hosts. Regardless of what man has written in books, we are endeavoring to share truth with you, that you may no longer walk in darkness, where therefore it is necessary for the regeneration to have its first desire inception, and its needs must be in that which man refers to as the conscious mind or objective mind, and must therefore be objective, dear hearts. Prayer is the innermost desire of good. When man desires to follow the path of regeneration and purification, to build a new foundation from the new pillars of the new temple of Solomon, the temple of the soul, so that nothing will destroy it ever, it is necessary to first cleanse the channels of communication, so that our messages of inspiration, as we send them to you, are properly received and are crystal clear, free of any distortion or misrepresentation and meaning to your understanding consciousness. First, one must cleanse and awaken the five physical centers, so that the seven spiritual centers may radiate brightly. Prayer is the first step to the fullness of spiritual realization. For remember, spirit is ever willing, spirit does not demand, does not command, spirit is ever willing. Now then, when man becomes fervent in his desire for righteousness in the conscious or objective thinking, he is beginning to cleanse, to purge all that which the conscious or objective mind has accepted in error from the five physical senses. Steadfast and persistent, without fear, without doubt, the conscious or objective state becomes illumined with desire for good. Now, when that of good leaves the objective thinking, it passes to the subjective, and there continues its cleansing of the air which the objective has sent to the subjective. When man of earth continues along constructive, pure, unselfish ideas, the subjective becomes completely permeated with spiritual creative records. It is then that which man calls superconsciousness of spirit can express its everlasting eternal willingness. Then shall come to pass the statement so commonly used in Orthodox theology: the power descends from on high. Let us mention the magnet, as when holding the magnet beneath a piece of paper or glass upon which are placed bits of metal, which will respond to the attraction of the magnet. As the magnet is moved about, the tiny metal particles form a pattern. Now this pattern cannot be formed regardless of the magnet, unless the tiny metallic particles were there. Now that which man has learned to call the subjective mind, what is received through pictures of love, peace, harmony, contentment, devotion, all that which is in accord with God-man, there's an attraction for the power, the magnet of the superconscious power. The willingness of spirit is then able to manifest, for it cannot manifest until it has that which to make it its manifestation. Therefore, silence, meditation, and concentration, any devotion to good, call it what you will, sets in motion in the objective mind that which is the first beginning on the path of the ascension or the path of regeneration. We have reasoned with you that man lives by desire, and that is speaking of man's unregenerated desire. God-man lives by desire, yes, but it is always righteous desire, not in the least limited or subjected to that of the five physical senses. When the subjective mind remains unregenerated and man is separated from the physical coil through what has been called death, when in this state and when in time he desires to return to the physical plane to finish unfinished business, he returns with just those qualities unto which he is subject to by the subjective mind of his former life. There's still a part of his desire pattern. Now this, we are aware, is in direct contradiction to much of which man on earth today understands, but when this law is understood, man shall be mindful how he weaves the daily portion of life's pattern allotted him to weave through this living. Hence, the age-old statement, as you sow, so shall you reap, until by continued mistakes, pain, and suffering, he learns a lesson. Why pain? Why suffering? Why want? Why lack? Why limitation? Are they the result of disobedience in some incarnation? Nay, nay, nay. It is an accumulation of repeated unfinished business of many lives and many incarnations, the rejection of facing the responsibilities of life and the principles of truth. It therefore behooves man to seek a righteous path. Fear, doubt, and emotionalism are contributing factors in your everyday terminology. They are the contributing factors to an unsound subjective intellectual picture, making it difficult, thought not impossible, for intelligence to permeate the intellect. May we repeat, as we have sometimes stated, mortally, man is a weakling, spiritually, he is a giant. Every fragment of doubt, fear, and superstition shall be removed from the subjective chamber, lest they continue to retard progress. Eventually, that which man of earth has learned to call death shall be annihilated, for there is no death. Can man of earth so live life's patterns that it is unnecessary to return and claim another physical vehicle? Our answer is yes, 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 yes. But he shall pass to the regeneration. When mortal man will use for himself that which it suggests to his fellow man to use, he'll become a good teacher of truth, first to himself. In one of our previous instructions, we said man can share with his fellow man only that which he possesses. And have we not also stated professing is not possessing? When one really possesses the radiance of spirit, it illumines the countenance, and his fellow man will say, what was he? What has she? Which I do not possess. For the eyes shone forth as stars in the firmament, and behold, the countenance thereof was radiant as alabaster, and the feet, understanding, were as gold, and the raiment, aura, white as snow. When the woman, whose physical habiliment was tortured with an issue of blood for many years, and she had spent her worldly possessions, and yet the issue of blood remained, she touched the hem of the garment. Does the universe have an aura? Yes. Do they also dwell in the universe have an aura? Yes. Do nations have an aura? Yes. Do cities have an aura? Yes. Do races have an aura? Yes. Everything that lives has an aura, dear heart. So the woman who had reached forth touched the hem of the garment. The garment she touched clothed the physical habiliment, and that physical habiliment clothed the soul. And that soul was subject to what but one power, the oneness of being. Therefore, there was but one aura in that garment, the aura of peace, love, healing, dear hearts. You remember the remaining part of the narrative. The Nazarene saw her not, neither did she behold the countenance of the Nazarene, and yet he said, what manner of man hath touched me? He was informed by the disciples that none had, unaware that the woman had touched the garment. The Nazarene said, verily, for this moment I felt it. The Nazarene is the embodiment of the Christ consciousness, as all mankind is the embodiment of the Christ consciousness. The 12 disciples surrounding the Nazarene, symbolizing in man of earth the beautiful thought pictures, the 12 powers of man spiritually expressed, the thoughts of righteousness expressed, sent to the subjective chamber, giving protection to man physically and spiritually. What symbology bears, the press of the throng, the disciples were within the protecting circle. Mind you, the throng was seeking, were they not? Among their number were many who were anxious to be healed of body, symbolizing the first steps in desire for regeneration. All this was symbolized in the consciousness of the woman. Mind you, she did not let doubt interfere. She did not let fear interfere. She reached through the throng, the press of the crowd, with but one desire and objective consciousness, one desire to reach the master. Part of the aura which became permeated with righteousness blended with the aura of the Master Jesus. Her divine self, her master in consciousness, became awakened and the issue of blood ceased. The Galilean knew when he said, arise, take up thy cross and follow me. Not follow him as the man Jesus. He did not mean this, but following the Christ light of the inner God-man. When the innate, persistent, unmoved, fervent desire remains steadfast in the objective consciousness, there can be no subjects in the subconscious chamber to misguide the subjects of the flesh habiliment. God-man comes to to his rightful heritage and rules on the throne of authority, on the 7 spiritual centers, radiating the spiritual light and power through the etheric body, purifying and spiritualizing the physical centers and pillars of the Temple of Solomon. In the spine are 2 central nerves known to man of earth as the great ganglia or ganglionic system of nerves. They're referred to in your Holy Writ as well as in the teachings of free and accepted Masonry as Boaz and Jachin, 1 Kings 7:21, which were given by Solomon to Hiram of Abith in recompense for his services in the construction of the temple. The lower part of the spine of the human or physical habiliment is a portion of gray matter, similar in construction to the gray matter of which the brain is made. In the front or in the region of the navel is likewise a similar substance of gray matter. Man does his thinking in that region of the abdomen, right in the back of the navel, and over a fine network of nerves, messages are sent and reach the substance in the lower part of the spine, known as the Kundalini center. That center acts as your present-day telegrapher's key and sends the messages up the ganglionic system of nerves to the brain. This is referred to in your Holy Writ, in the book of Revelation, as the 12 branches of the tree. Now, the messages that reach the various cell centers of the brain are sent through the physical body to each intelligence or nerve center. Through the physical habiliment are trillions of minute nerve centers, intelligence in their own right. They shall accept whatever message is sent to them and respond in accordance to that message. Therefore, if they receive a message of distress, mortally so, that is the only message they can respond to. But if they receive a message of constructive or affirmative structure, that is the message they shall respond to. Therefore, it behooves man at all times to think in an affirmative manner, even though he is becoming interested in that which is foreign or strange to him. It is unwise for him to become destructively critical, for in truth, all things are possible. Remember always, these pillars keep in perfect order the physical structure of the Temple of Solomon, the temple of the soul. Likewise, in your Holy Writ, in the book of Revelation 22:2, you will read, the branches and the leaves were given unto the nation, which means mankind, for the healing. And healing is constructive. Therefore, all thoughts should be constructive and not in the least wise negative. It is unwise for man to say, I do not know, or I am not interested, or I do not care. All ideas are worthy of consideration, for all constructive ideas come from the vastness or from the constructive source or seat which man has learned to call God. God is not man, as man beholds himself. God is power, God is truth, God is love, and that which teaches man the power of God, the love of God, and the truth of God is worthy of man's consideration and acceptance, regardless of the channel through which it comes. The Nazarene said, unto him who keepeth my law, I shall give unto him for an inheritance, the heathen. In your present interpretation, the heathen is understood as one who is without understanding and learning, and that is untrue. When Jesus made that utterance, the heathen were considered to be quiet, have humility and acceptance. Therefore, the Nazarene was expediently wise when he said to inherit that which promulgates truth is to inherit the power or understanding of the power that promotes life. Therefore, the Temple of Solomon becomes as substantial as man in his thinking causes it to be. Now, mind you well, as man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And the heart that Galilean referred to was the brain. That is the heart of man, for each part and particle of the physical habiliment or the Temple of Solomon responds to man's thinking as it passes back and forth through the pillars of the temple, known as the ganglionic system of nerves. Has it ever occurred to you, upon hearing some distressing news, you've had the experience of a weak, nauseating feeling in the region of your navel? Or if you have become startled over some sudden news which you accept in a negative manner, that is because that center has rebelled against the negative or physical weakness that man experiences with physical reaction. Man so often complains physically of a pain across the small of his back and attributes it to some physical weakness. That is not true. It is that center known as the Kundalinic center, rejecting that which is untrue and endeavoring to separate the wheat from the chaff so that the message passed up to the brain through the pillars of the temple reaches the 12 cranial nerves uncontaminated from air and sends to the cell structure of the brain the true and uncontaminated message of life, peace, power, and plenty. We trust you shall mentally digest and assimilate this information. Many have misunderstood much of what they have read in books about the construction of the ganglionic system of nerves, and they will not be in agreement, perhaps, with that which we are stating. However, with that we are not in leastwise concerned. It is our endeavor to lead man of earth from the unreal to the real, from darkness into light, from death into life, from mortality to immortality, life eternal. There's but one life for man to live, and that life is continuous, regardless of that which has been spoken of, mentioned, or written about through the centuries. As you reckon time, that life is allotted into portions. Those portions are known as rebirth. So it behooves man in his thinking to set his house in order. Let us clearly understood. It is not God's decree or dictum that man shall reincarnate or be born again. As man is now experiencing life in his present physical temple, he can make this adjustment by following the path of regeneration and rising in consciousness, thus making it unnecessary to choose another physical body in which to correct his error or pay his debt. As man lives in each physical body, he incurs a debt or creates the thought desire which shall bring him back in another physical tenement or another temple of Solomon. You'll remember the narrative of the wall of Jerusalem being repaired. That is what rebirth means to a man, returning to repair the walls of Jerusalem. And that repair can be accomplished in the present incarnation by creating no further error in thinking. Let man's thoughts be pure and righteous, which is right and uncontaminated by the antiquity of race consciousness. Separate the wheat from the chaff, and let your wheat be milled into perfect loaf leavened with the leaven of righteous understanding, that you may feast upon that which spells out freedom and liberty. The Nazarene likewise said, by their fruits shall you know them. The apple tree bears apples, not a palm or a pear. Each tree its own fruit. So the Galilean was expediently wise when he made that statement. By their fruits shall you know them. Mortal man is inclined or prone to live a life or expression of pretense. Outwardly, he may manifest righteously, and inwardly be filled with contempt. Now, we do not mean to be destructively critical, but you have found that to be so, and man's inward thinking or his inward emotion never becomes so enshrouded by the outer pretense that it absolves him from creating an error within himself. First, man shall be true to himself, and then he shall be true to his fellow man. For by being true to himself, he is true to God. And the proper message, the affirmative message, is passing back and forth through the great pillars of the Temple of Solomon and reaching the cells in the brain and putting all in righteous or right order.